Are Americans secretly manipulating the climate? Observe the very upper atmosphere for strategic purposes. This is the official goal of the US HAARP research program. Too honest not to spark the imagination of conspirators, convinced that the Cold War is not over and that Donald Trump's country is capable of reigning and controlling minds from a distance. Crime does not pay. Transparency either. The U.S. military has learned this the hard way. It, which maintains gray areas on many programs concerning intelligence or new weapons, nevertheless demonstrates great clarity on the nature of HAARP, High-Frequency Active or Auroral Research Program. An acronym that can be translated as Research Program in the field of high frequencies applied to the Northern Lights. It was in 1990 that the 180 antennas of this Army-led science project were deployed to a site covering nearly 14 hectares in Alaska. The U.S. military installation HAARP was used to create light spots at an altitude of 100 kilometers, during an aurora borealis, photographed by Kareem Major. Estimated cost, $30 million. Official objective, to establish a better understanding of the characteristics and behavior of this upper layer of the atmosphere, in particular to improve the control of communication and surveillance systems. Clearly, scanning the sky to better understand the flight plan of enemy missiles, especially Russian and North Korean. A rather precise route order, but not enough to put to sleep the suspicion of the conspirators. Popeye in Vietnam. On the stopmensonges.com site, no less than 9 articles have been published since 2012 to discuss a program which, according to the authors, aims to manipulate the climate for military purposes and would be endowed with a much larger budget. Other online conspiratorial sources claim that HAARP is the Trojan horse allowing the United States to wage climate wars. The difficulty is that unlike atomic weapons, which inevitably leave traces in nuclear tests, weather wars are invisible. Why such an obsession? According to Fabian Locker, historian at the CNRS and specialist in the relationship between war and the environment, these rumors have their basis in the immediate post-war period. There were indeed plans for weather wars. In 1946, Nobel laureate in chemistry Irving Langmuir proposed a cloud seeding project with, ultimately, the possibility of making a train. We are sure of this. The American military archives confirm it, while those of the Soviets are obviously less talkative, underlines the historian. The difficulty is that unlike atomic weapons, which inevitably leave traces in the event of nuclear tests, weather wars are invisible. For a project like Popeye, the name of an experiment carried out during the Vietnam War, we have archives, but no results with precise results. The HAARP station, located in Gacona, Alaska, photographed by Zhao Kanzani. The outcome of the Vietnamese conflict shows that while such programs could have been deployed one day, to speak of a lethal weapon to qualify them seems presumptuous. This is, moreover, the main objection that we can address to the critics of the HAARP program. If manipulating the climate were so simple, California would not experience the greatest drought in its history, as has been the case for several years already. In addition, the UNMOD Convention, ratified by the United Nations in 1976, formally prohibits any recourse or research on weapons aimed at modifying the environment. A legal warning that has not been followed up, assure the conspirators, convinced that HAARP seeks to make it rain, create cyclones or even cause fires. Old school plot because it leaves no traces. Weather warfare is the honey of those who have another truth. Any climate catastrophe to hit a country could potentially be unleashed by one of its geopolitical enemies. All the vagaries of the said weather are watched. In November 2015, Saudi Arabia was showered by torrential rains and Qatar saw the equivalent of a year of precipitation fall in less than 24 hours. The signing of the Russian equivalent of the HAARP program, swears the stopmensonges.com site. Fake photographs are shared on the internet to show Americans are already manipulating the climate and threatening New York. For Fabian Locker, this stubborn belief in a reality crazier than the official version stems from the persistence of the ideology of the Cold War years. Basically, the fantasies about HAARP are very classic. They are part of a logic of technology fix, in other words the belief that man will succeed in modifying the planet through science. It should be remembered, however, that in the 1960s we succeeded in creating, from an American nuclear test, a particle cell which remained present for a few weeks in orbit around the Earth. We were then totally imbued with this logic of Star Wars where planet Earth alone was no longer sufficient to satisfy scientific curiosity. 50 years later, for proponents of the Promethean ideology, it is not illogical that they think we can do better. It's almost old school as a conspiracy theory. Iraqi brain check. The intentional climate change is not the only grievance of the anti-HAARP crusaders, who argue that the ultimate goal of the program is in fact the takeover of enemy brains. According to the independent American researcher Nick Begich, author of the book Angels Do Not Play This HAARP, with John Manning, Earthpulse Press, 1995, the weapons created within the framework of the mysterious research program would have a disturbing psychological effect on the being human by sending high-power ELF, extremely low-frequency, waves, enough to mentally manipulate individuals at a distance and without their knowledge. If, during the Gulf War, thousands of Iraqi soldiers surrendered without a fight, then it would not be because of the American military blast, Begich explains, but thanks to the invisible power of Uncle Sam's HAARP. We talked about climate cooling, now we are talking about warming. I think it's just the weather. In the end, an incredulous dive into the plot to explore the hypotheses put forward against the controversial research program is like attending a pipe concert. But as often with these theories, which only exist because they tickle our desire for another reality, we often end up making a sort of modern Pascalian bet and converting to these theses simply out of opportunism. In other words, if it's wrong, too bad, but if ever, the Americans, you really have the weapon that can manipulate brains from a distance and make it rain, then thank you for making oases spring up in those who are thirsty and you have fun with the terrorists. In the meantime, to fuel collective angst about our climate future, everyone can ponder the fact that Donald Trump has won the Republican primary, even though he considers global warming a made-up concept by the Chinese to harm the Yankee economy. We talked about climate cooling, now we are talking about warming. I think it's just the weather.